handle the truth.
Every basketball fan who keeps up with the NBA social media has seen numerous debates in comment sections or have even debated with friends about specific NBA players who would be better or worse in different eras. I'm Mikey Domagala, and to me, I feel like any of the top 25 players in NBA history could dominate any era. Look at LeBron James. His combination of skill, athleticism, and power would have him averaging 25, 7, and 7 in any era. But the yelling with the refs and maybe him being a little soft would be his downfall in those eras. He wouldn't like Charles Oakley knocking him to the floor and then there's no foul and the game's already going on the other way. Even Shaquille O'Neal, he'd take lunch money in today's era of centers. I mean, him against Karl Anthony Towns or even Nikola Jokic, I could see Shaq just dominating. Then there's Kevin Durant, 7-footer who would kill in any era himself. But outside of those top 25 in that range, you could debate whether players would be better or worse if they time traveled into a different era of NBA basketball. That's where the Truth Podcast's new segment called Era Swapping comes into play. Myself and my co-host, Jermaine Barnes, a longtime overseas pro, will continue interviewing NBA personnel for the Truth Podcast, of course, but Era Swapping will account for some fun conversations and will even bring on special guests for future segments of Era Swapping. Now, there's a criteria here, and Jermaine, I'm sure you're going to like this because we're going to cover every era, different players, one guard, one forward, one big man. It doesn't matter which, but one has to be from the 1960s to 1990s, and then the 2000s to the 2010s, and then the modern era of NBA basketball, the three-point shooting era, the 2020s. So, Jermaine, the first segment, 3 players, who we're going to be going with for episode 1, if you'd like to call it that, of era swapping?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, we got to start with Larry the Legend, who I consider the greatest small forward of all time and in my top 10 all time. Well, actually, he's in my top 5. Everybody knows that. The great Stephon Marbury, New York legend, would be a great addition. And of course, Karl Anthony Towns, the big versatile Dominican playing for Minnesota right now. I think those would be the top 3. I have to start off with the legend, Larry Bird. I think Larry Bird has the most universal game to any era, over any player of all times. If we're going to compare to today's era, I always said he's a mixture between Luka and Joker. Easily. He has Joker size, but Luka's game. Now, Larry Bird was a tremendous shooter. He was super confident. He can handle the ball. He can pass the ball with the best of them. But he also had the ability to step out, but also the ability to bang. A career 10 rebound guy. You know, we got to think about this. In Bird's early years, he's 27, 12, and 7. When the back went out, it went to 19 and 9. You know what I'm saying? So we got to understand what's going on then in a hand-checking and physically dominant era. So what would happen today when you can't touch? I listen to all these modern fans that have never done anything athletic in their life, never coached in their life, nothing. They're just couch potatoes. Tell me he's slow. Oh, LeBron James would destroy him. This guy would destroy him. This era is so athletic, this, and this. But Jokic can't jump over a piece of paper, and he dominates this generation. Luka's not fast and not athletic at all. Dominates this generation. So what would happen if you merge the two? You know, so that's the biggest thing to me. Larry Bird, in my personal opinion, would be an easily 36, 15, and 8 guy in this era and generation, not just based off his talent and skill, but also his mindset, confidence, and ability to play the game of basketball at a high IQ level. I think he would be the greatest player of all time in this era.
And that's why he's in my top 5. He's a winner as well, cutthroat mentality, knockdown shooter. And Jermaine, in that era, Bird was only taking like 2 to 3 threes a game. Now, Steph is shooting like 11 to 14 threes a game. Like you said, his averages would be way up like Bird. I agree. And I would love to see him in this shooting era because like you said, he can bang, but Bird shooting 8 to 10 threes a game. Geez, talk about breaking some records. And for me, So you have Bird, which will cover the player of the 1960s to the 1990s. For
Yeah.
me, I'll go into the modern era. I mean, Karl Anthony Towns. Towns fits in the new school mold of the NBA big men, 6'11", athletic big who could shoot, finish at the rim, career 40% three-point shooter. Of course, that's impressive as a big man. You know, we don't see too many three-point shooting big men who shoot it that efficiently at 40%. But he even coined himself the greatest three-point shooting big in NBA history. To me, I would go with Dirk Nowitzki. I'm sure he would like a word with Towns for that. But he's dynamic enough to be good in any era, Karl Anthony Towns. But can he be great in any era? That's the question I think I would put forward to the listeners, because I don't think so. Towns has averaged 25-10 on 50% field goal percentage, 40% three-point percentage over the last 3 years, every year. Now, that's extremely impressive in this era, but they haven't led to winning. He's not exactly the greatest leader because he's barely made any playoffs. And, you know, they're always outside the playoff race, the Minnesota Timberwolves, even though they have good pieces. So does that mean Karl Anthony Towns plays for stats? Not really. It's just he's not this dynamic leader who does enough. Now, why wouldn't Towns be great in any era? I think the 2022 NBA landscape is perfect for him. Like I said, a shooting big, athletic, 5 to 6 threes a game, above average mid-range. But inside, he's not exactly overpowering big men like he should be, I would say, in this era. Now, put him in the 1980s, 1990s, where interior defense is insane. Guys like Shaquille O'Neal, Hakeem Olajuwon, Mark Eaton, Mutombo. Now, like I said, he could shoot, he could stretch the floor, but Towns doesn't have the greatest post moves. So if Towns isn't eating Nikola Jokic, Embiid, and lesser centers in the NBA today, how would he be that good back then? The physicality of the years of the 80s and 90s would hurt him. He would benefit with his outside shooting. But back in the 80s and 90s, JB, it's like I was saying with Bird, only took 2 to 3 threes a game. So why would Towns shoot 8 to 10 in the 80s and 90s? He wouldn't. He'd have to really rely inside, and he's a little soft in there. Towns has postered a lot of players in today's game, but there are a lot of guards. So, Jermaine, I'm sure you're going to smile and like this. How would Karl Anthony Towns climb Mount Mutombo? I'm not sure. Right now, Towns averages 24 and 10. 80s and 90s, I could see 17 and 8. I could see him just get swallowed up in the paint. Like I said, Towns, great player today, fits the NBA's mold and has helped shape that mold of a shooting big man. But 80s, 90s, even the early 2000s, I see those numbers dropping, JB. What do you think?
I see big, smooth Sam Perkins.
Okay.
Nothing personal, but that's what I see. Perkins was All-American at Carolina, came into the NBA, you know, with the Lakers and did a great job, but he wanted to be outside. Like he was really good, but that's what I see with Towns. I personally am biased. I think the 80s and 90s guys would dominate the modern day era, but I don't think these new guys could dominate back then. And they always say, you old heads, but I'm in a generation of LeBron James, so that means I would be bragging on the time before my time, you know? So I saw the physicality that those guys went through. Dominique Wilkins and these guys are being held, and they're still getting 30. These guys are freelance, and they still can't dominate. As you said, Towns is not a winner. I think he's a really good player and a really good guy, but I don't think he's great, and I don't think it transitions.
It's a good comparison, Sam Perkins, because he was one of the first kind of stretch bigs out there. And something that hurts Towns, JB, he's only 6'11". I mean, all right, Dennis Rodman wasn't huge, but Towns isn't Rodman on the boards. And also, like I said, with the post moves, how's he going to go up against Mutombo, Mark Eaton, who's like 7'3", Hakeem, Shaq, and guys like that? It's just, Towns fits this era perfectly. And he's, I wouldn't say lucky. He's, you know, he benefits from it. So who would you go in number 3 for era swapping?
It's definitely Starberry. And I think it's biased of me because I know Steph personally, but he's the guy on a personal note that took a bit of a blackballing from the NBA based off his personal. It reminds me of Barry Bonds or Terrell Owens. You're not looking at his production, you're more so looking at his behavior. But we have to understand, he's one of only 5 guards in NBA history that went 22 and 10 assists, 8 seasons. That's incredible. That's incredible. And I think one of his biggest regrets was leaving Minnesota with KG, because I think they could have did a lot of special things together. But when you're talking about somebody superior at the game of basketball, phenomenal handle on a Kyrie Irving level, amazing shooting ability. So you're talking about Dame Lillard shooting ability, Kyrie Irving ball handling, but power guard strength and the athleticism of a Westbrook. I know you remember the virtual play from New Jersey where he caught the lob over his head backwards. Nobody knew Marbury had the 42-inch vertical. Like, the guy universally had everything. We're talking about ball handling, shooting ability, athleticism, power, strength, and quickness in one package. That translates to all eras. This generation right now, Marbury is 33 a night. Points a night. Easy. And I think that shows based off what Chris Paul's doing. Chris Paul is at the latter point of his career. When you watch him play the game, he dominates. Why? His IQ is beyond anything anybody can imagine. So imagine CP3, 2 inches taller, with a 40-inch vertical, more speed, and better shooting ability from the outside. Because Marbury could shoot it from half court like it was a free throw.
And you got to give credit to that. Mike. Got to give credit to that New York grit as well from Marbury. Now, he did butt heads with the media, and he would be interesting in 2022 with social media. But man,
that's a good point. No, stay on that point. See, that's a great point right there, that we're not just talking about basketball. How some of these old school guys translate to the social media era. Marbury probably wouldn't do as good because he's a straight shooter. He would struggle with the media today, maybe kind of like a Kevin Durant, so to speak, because Durant is very emotional and passionate about his stuff. So it will probably be the same thing. So that's a great point too.
Yeah. And I mean, this isn't just his basketball, because I do agree with you. The Starbury sneakers, I mean, we just got to give a shout out to Stephon Marbury for doing that for the culture. I feel like every kid in the mid 2000s had a pair of Starburys, $20 sneakers, Jermaine. I mean, that's as affordable could be. And then he goes to China, and then he's beloved in China. I know you remember that era of his basketball play.
Well, we got to look at some other stigmas if we want to go into religion, so to speak. Let's say Jesus Christ, right? People think they killed him for one reason, but they really killed him because he was affecting the money of the church. So now let's go to Malcolm X. They killed him for a different reason. You're affecting the money. So when Jordans, Bronze, whatever, these shoes are selling for $150, $200, and here comes this guy who's a star saying, my shoe's only going to be $20. They're not going to support you because you're affecting the economy of the shoe. Shoes have a rate. Nobody can sell $20 shoes. What are you doing? You know, so he's rebelling against the system. So yes, it's noble, but you have to know what you're about to go up against when you make those kind of power decisions.
Anytime you go against the system, it's always an issue. And just to finish on Marbury, like you said, him staying in Minnesota. Now, listen, they had some good pieces. Wally Zerbiak, some other guys as well. I'm curious to see KG in his prime, which he was entering at that point, Steph in his prime, and maybe another mid-level star, you know, another guy at the wing. See if they could win a championship if they stay together.
They would have won a title. And if you think about it, everywhere Steph went, they won. And they were losers. When he went to Phoenix, they were losing. He made Amari Stoudemire an all-star. When he went to New Jersey, they were losing. He made that city relevant. Everybody went to see him. Like, he gets a bad rep. But what we don't realize is New York City #1 high school player went to Georgia Tech when Georgia's a football state. He made them special. He's Allen Iverson-ish. Like, he is an icon that just didn't go along with the system. So the league didn't support him. Like, he got a little support, but he made more culture decisions like the &1 and, you know, staying close to his roots and things like that, selling shoes cheap or whatever. It's noble, but it's the get along gang, like Kwame Brown said about LeBron. If you don't play the game, they're not going to support you. So I think he made a decision and he understands the system of life. But we're here to talk about basketball. If we're talking about just basketball, Stephon Marbury was Isaiah Thomas-ish. He was great, not good.
Yeah, Jermaine, there's not much more to be said. And covering those three on episode 1, I'm excited to see who else we would cover in episode 2. That was the Truth Podcast first segment of Era Swapping. Which 3 players do you want us to cover on the next segment? Leave a comment below or send us a DM on Instagram @_the Truth Podcast _ @Mikey Domagala or @juiceman.8. So if there's a player from the 60s to 90s, a player from the 2000s, 2010s, and the current era, tell us who you want us to cover on the next one.
We ain't covering Draymond Green because he don't even work in this era.
You can't handle the truth.